Hi everyone, it's Religious Fanboy here again, and welcome to Episode 6 of the Church Hunt Prep Podcast. Today we are going to be analyzing the story of the birth of Jesus as told in the book of Revelation, specifically going verse by verse, looking at the different pieces of symbolism and unpacking their meanings. The translation we'll be using is Revelation is the English Standard Version, and our primary source for textual analysis commentaries was the commentaries available on Bible Hub. Verse 1 says, "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the, with the moon under her feet, and her head and on her head a crown of 12 stars." The verses that we're covering today are Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. The woman talked about in verse 1 most likely represents Mary, the mother of Jesus. The woman being clothed with the sun and having the moon at her feet most likely symbolize Mary being pregnant with Jesus due to the sun and moon being two of the earliest creations by God in the book of Genesis, as well as the many times throughout the Bible and later in the book of Revelation that God is attributed to being a light source. The 12 stars on the woman's crown could be a reference to the 12 apostles, as well as being a symbolic for the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 2 of chapter 12 says that she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. This Bible verse, in its role in this passage, provides clear confirmation that this was close to the point where Jesus was about to be born. This verse also addresses Mary's personal sacrifice in being obedient to God, both the external hardships that she faced as well as the internal hardships. In this case, specifically the pains of childbirth. which we are informed about initially in Genesis chapter 3, as being referenced as one of the punishments caused by the fall of man in Genesis chapter 3. Revelation chapter 12 verse 3 says, "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems." The dragon has been used to reference Herod, but most commonly is used to symbolize Satan or the adversary. Some evidence that we get of this is in the color of the dragon. Throughout the book of Revelation, the color red is used in several times and in many ways to symbolize an evil nature. We see this not only in the description of the dragon in this passage, but also in other passages, especially referring to the scarlet beast and the woman in red. The dragon's 10 horns could also be symbolic of the worldly kings that are under the authority of the dragon, as well as the woman in red, and who bowed down to them in exchange of worldly power and influence. And this would also tie the dragon's pursuit symbolically to Herod's pursuit and desire to kill Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. The 7 diadems, as well as the 7 heads. The number 7, especially in the book of Revelation, is used to symbolize completion or ultimate. We see this earlier in the book of Revelation when describing the lamb that symbolizes Jesus, who we are told had 7 eyes and 7 horns. 7 eyes representing perfect or complete knowledge, and 7 horns representing complete strength or perfect power or perfect strength. And because of the mention of the 7 diadems, and how diadems would have usually been worn by people of power, we can assume that the diadems, like the 10 horns, were used to convey the dragon's power. Could either be reference to the power he had over the earth, or his past angelic status that he had prior to falling. Chapter 12 verse 4 says that his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. The stars from heaven that the dragon had struck down, depending on the commentaries, these stars have been referred to as either ministers or angels that had been corrupted by Satan, thus causing them to fall from the heavens. This could have also been reference to Herod's actions that led to him to send soldiers out to kill children in attempts to kill Jesus. Verse 5 says that she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. The child represents Jesus, and the iron rod is used to symbolize Jesus' title as the Good Shepherd, as well as reference the story of the Old Testament, where the statue of a serpent wrapped around a pole was created in order to cure the children of Israel of an illness. This conveys to us that unlike the dragon, who uses his power and influence to rule over God's creation, this child is being sent to use its power in order to save God's creation. Our last Bible verse for today, Revelation chapter 12, verse 6, says that, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,000 260 days. The use of the word wilderness in this verse could be a reference to them being called out of the promised land, being the nation of Israel, and specifically in this case, them being called to flee into Egypt by the angels. And Egypt is significant because of the many times that God uses Egypt throughout the events of the Bible and throughout history, and given the context of when this would have been written, in their very present recent history and their current present. Throughout the Bible, we see the first example of this was the way in which Egypt had been a safe place that we are told that both Abraham and Isaac lived on during different times of their journey. The next example we see is how Joseph's close friendship with Pharaoh made it so that his family could be free from the effects of the 7 years of famine, as well as Moses finding safety through being taken in by the Pharaoh's daughter in the beginning of Exodus. And we see throughout the later parts of Second Temple Rabbinic Judaism that Egypt, up until the last of the revolts, had the largest population, or one of the largest populations, of diaspora Jews. It has been a wonderful pleasure and privilege to go over this passage of scripture with you. In the links to this, in the description of this video, there are also links to some of the churches that we have partnered with, both to donate to them as a thank you for their support of this podcast, as well as information about their service schedules, as well as a way of being able to access their Christmas sermons as they come out, as well as listening to any of their previous sermons and services. With that being said, I hope and pray that you took away from this episode and took away from this passage of scripture whatever God intends for you to take away from it, and that you are reminded that no matter what season you are experiencing in life, that God has not and will never abandon you. With that being said, Merry Christmas, may God be with you, and see you next time. Bye.